welcome to the Larp Communities panel discussion. My name is Kaisa, and I am moderating this panel. And I think we should start with a round of introductions. If you will introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, or yeah, let's just start with that. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Leonid. I am from Russia, and you have to sorry me for my language. I organized a few Larps in St. Petersburg, and also I made some IT tools to connect Russian community in a way where I made a Russian-wide calendar for Larps, for example.
So hi, I'm Massi Hannula Thorhauge. I'm a Finn, but I lived 8 years in Denmark, so I belong to both Larp communities, I think. And I'm a Larp designer, producer, and con organizer.
Yes. Hi, I'm Linn Wilhelmsson. Is there anyone here who is not Finnish? Okay, good. Then I'll mention that Finland has 2 languages, and I belong to the Swedish-speaking language minority, and I come from that Larp culture and represent fellow Swedish Larpers, and I do not really make Larps, but I'm a participant.
Hello, my name is Kaisa Vainio. I'm Finn, and I studied LARPing 13 years ago in northern Finland, which is still like my home community, or actually 2 communities. And I'm, well, LARPer, designer and organizer.
And I'm John Shockley from the UK. I'm what you'd class as a veteran UK LARPer, having first started doing this incredible hobby 33 years ago. I'm part of the UK scene as an organiser, a writer and a participant, and also count myself part of the international LARP community. So
that leads us, if we're talking about communities, that leads us to a question, how do we define community? What makes a community? Is it the same thing as saying like the Finnish LARP community and the Finnish LARP scene? Is it the same thing? And I would like to hear some of your views on this. Is a scene and a community the same thing? Or how do you define it? Yes, Massi, go ahead.
Well, I actually don't think that they are exactly the same thing, but I think the line to draw between the word community and the scene in this context is, it is a gray line. But I think there is communities inside scenes, but no, not scenes inside community. And just because there's Finns present, and I discussed this a little bit earlier today as well, scene is skene. Let's make it clear.
Linn.
Yeah, because I work with languages, I of course had to think about this a little bit further. What's the definition of a scene and a community? And I don't think that there's any, I don't know if anyone has made an official announcement about this, but I agree very much with Massi about this, that, and I also feel like scene is, this is just my view of it, that scene is sort of has to do with geography, while community has to do with like belongingness, or like the community around, for example, a LARP campaign or a LARP phenomena like Nordic LARP community or such. But I might not be the one to decide, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I totally agree with the present speakers, and I could say that scene is something more symbolical that you can identify with. That yes, I belong, yes, thank you, in the Nordic LARP scene or Finnish scene, but the community I belong into, I know the people who are there. I can say that this person is the same community with me, but the scene, you never know who is there.
I think the UK perhaps has a slightly unique approach to our LARP scene, if you like. It is incredibly fragmented, and there is nothing in the UK that you could describe as a UK LARP community. And indeed, as I'll probably reveal later on, every attempt to create such a thing has ended up in awful toxicity.
So would you say that there are different communities in the UK LARP scene then, or?
Yes, very much so. There's a freeform community, there's a Nordic LARP community, there are international LARP communities within the UK that are kind of nascent groupings of UK LARPers who are trying to attract all of you very fine people to come and play our LARPs. But there are also very many old, entrenched, insular, closed-off communities of LARPers to which you, and indeed I, am not invited.
Okay.
Okay, I also want to say that community is 100% about belonging. I am a part of this, and I consider you a part of same thing that I am part of.
That actually covered some of my next question, which was that is there such a thing as a Finnish LARP community or a UK LARP community, which apparently there is not. How about what would you say about Finland or Denmark?
Well, I would definitely say that in Finland there is a LARP scene, and there is a Danish LARP scene, and then there is a Nordic LARP scene. And then there's a Finland-Svenska LARP scene, which is a totally different thing than the Finnish LARP scene. But I think they could be like sisters, lovely sisters. But within these big scenes, I don't see that there is like this one community that is the all Finnish LARPers or all Danish LARPers, especially not in Denmark, because Denmark is super like the capital area. They have their own island. They're there. And then there is the Danish peninsula. If you know the geography, Denmark looks like a nose. And the peninsula has its totally own community, which disses the capital community, the Copenhagen region community, and so on. So I think that you couldn't say that they're the same community, except if there comes somebody from outside, for example, from Finland, and says like, Danish LARPers, you something stupid in there in the city of Höllerö, and then the whole Danish LARP scene will gather as a community and defend their own in that way. Does it make sense?
So like LARP nationalism.
Yeah.
I can totally sort of relate to that with my LARP community, also because Finno-Swedes are Finns, but as LARPers, the Finno-Swedish LARP culture is, some people have done research about this, it's like a very much a mix between Finnish and Swedish, like how LARPs are done. But I would, since I don't see myself as LARPing in the Finnish LARP scene, even though I do Finno-Swedish LARPs, or did. So it's, I forgot what the original question was.
I think you answered it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, in the northern Finland, at some point we were discussing about, like, is there any southern Finnish community, LARP community? Because we have special northern LARP community of northern Finland. It's quite local, and it's because we are quite a few. Like, if you organize a game, everyone comes there, and it's like maximum 50 people. So you get to know each other quite. But if you have so many people, like even in Helsinki area, I guess it's quite difficult to form a community where you would really know each other.
I think in Russia the situation is more like United Kingdom. We have a lot of communities. We are split by our geography because, Russia is a really, really big country and we don't have a lot of money to fly around. If we are talking about Moscow, St. Petersburg, and like a central region of Russia, I think we have two communities who consider themselves mainstream LARP communities. But but they at least know about each other, and there are a lot of small communities who not know about mainline communities or do not want to know about them.
I do think that, like, we could talk about, the Northern Finland LARP community. You're so little amount of people that it is a small community. But I could call Helsinki or the capital region LARP community as a one LARP community, but then there is small communities inside this community. So there is the Ropecon LARP community, there is the LARPers who go to international events that I would call a community. There forms communities around certain LARP events or conventions or LARP campaigns and so on. So I think that there can be several communities inside a bigger community, and you can belong to like 10 communities without actually a problem.
Something I find quite interesting is the way that you talk about your communities as being geographical. In the UK, that is, I would venture, very much not the case. I guess because we're a small country with a large number of LARPers, our communities tend to build around campaigns or tend to build around styles of play. But we have quite a lot of capacity to travel for games, so within the country. So you'll find that those kind of communities don't build up around an individual location generally. It tends to be a system.
I'll just ask John about the UK scene. Is it like an ideological split? Or
yes, in a number of cases, yes, it is. We like to claim that we invented LARP back in the 80s, and whether you buy into the truth of that or not, we have a lot of old LARPers with entrenched opinions on what constitutes LARP. And then when new ideas arrive, they're not always met with great enthusiasm. That causes a lot of friction within the scene and has caused on a number of occasions some quite broad fragmentation of our scene. Since the internet has arrived, it's got worse, not better. I mean, there are a number of UK LARPers who can start fights in empty rooms. You give them the whole internet and they're sure to just drag the whole thing into a horrible, toxic swamp.
I testify, I know some of them. Hello.
yes, I was coming next to the online communities part of my of my little list of questions. Which is, does your country have a national online community? Like Finland has the Suomi LARP Facebook group, and how representative is that of the actual scene in the country? So, if you want to, like, do other countries have this kind of online communities? Yep.
Well, Denmark at least has the Danske Rollespillere Facebook group, which tried, at least in the start, to be sort of national LARP community Facebook group. It's very toxic and there's a lot of fights going on, but that's internet. But being inside the community, I would say that it doesn't actually represent it. It is a way to get information out to the other people in the community, but if you just look at it, it doesn't represent the love and the great things that are happening in the communities or in the scene. So it's a sort of a shouting window. I wouldn't put it as a representative of community.
In Russia, I think we do not have any like a national online community. In our community, which centered about ComCon convention, we are using a lot of online chats, maybe with 400 participants as some kind of these communities, but it's hardly representative for all Russia or even for maybe our community.
I just say that you have a huge country compared to, for example, Denmark, which is like a little turd in the side of Europe, and you have the country which is like a super large. So in that way, also it's understandable that you don't have a national community.
I have very little to say about this because Finno-Swedes are so few that no.
I'm really happy that we have all these information technologies and social medias because, well, from northern Finland, quite many people move to southern Finland. And we could maybe lose them from our community, but no, they are still represented online in our discussions, in our Slack group, in our Facebook. And it really makes good feeling that you can keep these people even though they are not locally there where you are. So, yeah.
In terms of online communities, we do occasionally make an attempt to communicate with one another online. We have certain national Facebook groups. We have had national forums before, but often there seems to be a cycle of someone gets enthusiastic, creates one of these, it starts to grow, it thrives for a little while, we use it sensibly and like grown-ups, and then someone drops a, I don't know, drow a racist bomb into the middle of it all, and it turns into horrible acrimony, and then gets torn down, only for 6 months later that to be reborn. Again, something that I'm not sure you guys necessarily have the same in your countries. Our LARP communities seem to be a series of interlocking cults of personality. So you'll get game organisers who are regarded very highly by their players, who then form this kind of community around that individual or that small group of individuals. And that will flourish for as long as that person is involved in the scene. And quite often they're very tribal. And people who play this game don't talk to people who play this game. And so trying to put that together to make a national community is really difficult.
Yeah, I think that might have something to do with the amount of people you have in the LARP community or scene, because the Finnish, for example, the Finnish national community, if we could call the Suomi LARP, Finland LARP group on Facebook, it's thousands of people, I think, and it's not all the Finnish LARPers, but it's a good part of Finnish LARPers, but you're like a million times more people than we are. And at some point, online communities, whatever they are, when they get large, they get unbearable to manage. Yeah. And
just to sort of respond to that, my other hobby when I'm not doing LARP, which seems to be never these days, is motorsport. And the motorsport community in the UK has all the same problems that the LARP community in the UK has, or the LARP scene. That kind of level of toxicity seems to be inherent to people. So it's not all of our faults. Maybe.
And relating to what Massi said about like comparing amounts of people, I did realize right now that there was another Finno-Swedish LARP community doing LARPs a couple of years back, mainly vampire LARPs. Then 5 people left, and it died down because that was sort of because that's how few we are.
I actually seem to have skipped a question, so I'm going to go back just a little bit, just to get an idea of where you see yourself. So I will ask, what LARP communities do you feel you belong to? So let's do a little round.
I have an idea that a LARP community is more or less decided by convention. You think your main conventions. If you regularly attend some conventions, you are part of it. So I think I am a part of a convention community in Russia. Okay.
Well, I belong to so many communities that I don't tell all of them here. But I think that I mainly belong to the Finnish capital region LARP community and also the Finnish freeforms community, which is like tiny. We're like 20 people. We meet at my summer house. And then I definitely belong to the Orhusian vampire, the masquerade community, at least a little bit. But now I have left the LARP, so sorry guys, you'll die as well, I think.
I'm from Vaasa in Pohjanmaa in the west coast of the middle of the country. So I'm part of the LARP culture there around the role-playing society Eloria. Recently moved to Helsinki, so now I sort of consider myself also, I suppose, part of the capital area LARPers, at least around the people who do more international games, because my Finnish is poor-ish, so I don't really LARP in Finnish. And then also, you forgot Knutpunkt community.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely there.
Yes, which is the Nordic LARP conference that is arranged annually. You also forgot COW, if you count that as a community. But yeah, College of Wizardry.
I said that I belong to so many communities.
All right, that's
that
true.
At least
Yes, it's very relevant to me at the moment. So yes, I think that's it.
Yeah, I would say I belong to many LARP organizations, which is kind of form I understand. It's quite easy. You just like pay your fee and then you're in. But anyway, there are local communities. So in northern Finland, city of Oulu, Oulun interaktiiviset eläytyjät, ry, oi ei, which is, well, local organization where I have been active in 13 years. Even much more northern Rovaniemen live-roolipelaajat, which I have t-shirt to note you. Yes, but I have been active in southern Finland as well, and I really kind of feel that there are so many people I already know that there is some community I could be inside. So I signed to Illusia organization to feel more home. And yeah, I feel that it's kind of community as well. Group of nice people who welcome you to be with them. So that's like what is community to me.
So I touched on this a little bit right at the very start. Like Massi, I belong to so many different communities within the LARP scene because I do so much LARP. Primarily, these days, I think I'd probably consider myself an international LARPer, first and foremost. And that's aside from being from the UK. That's the community that includes a number of people whose faces I see in this room and indeed on this panel. Within the UK, I am part of the UK Nordic LARP community. I'm trying to help UK LARP move forward from its roots, and there's a community of us that are working to do that, working to bring in some of the practices we see in international LARP and in other people's LARPs. But also at the same time, I'm still part of communities around some of the bigger UK games. So Empire, which is one of our largest fantasy LARPs, I'm definitely part of the Empire community. I'm definitely a part of the COW community. And so, yeah, trying to characterise myself, I have to keep coming back to I'm an international LARPer and part of that community.
The international and the COW mentions bring to mind that I think Kaisa said earlier that in a community you know each other. But think about something like College of Wizardry community, which definitely is, in my mind, a community. And there are so many people, like even I have gone to many, many runs, but there are so many people there I've never even met and we're in the same community. And Linn and John are both in the COW community, but you haven't actually played COW together.
No, that's true.
Yeah, we haven't either.
No. We have played other games together, though.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have any comments on that kind of community that largely, I guess, exists? Where does it exist? Like, is it just the online COW community thing, or?
I don't know, it has to be something about being a game that is run so many times that you can actually be in the same, count yourself as one person in the community even though you've never met. So I suppose there are a couple of LARPs that can sort of create that kind of community, like, the Convention of Thorns and what are these games, Just a Little Loving, for example, probably has a community. I haven't been to that game. Have any of you?
No, but I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they probably have a community of their own. So yeah.
I think here we come to the actual definition of what does community mean, like for reals. That is it a tangible group of people, or can it be an online community where you haven't been meeting the other people? I think that community can be, it doesn't need to be organized, but it needs to have something it revolves around. So like in College of Wizardry is a cow. It is very much the thing. It is not a Harry Potter LARP, it's a Harry Potter LARP in a castle in Poland, and it really much revolves around all the things Harry Potter, not Harry Potter, Warner Bros, hey. But it revolves totally around this thing. And everybody has the same enthusiasm around this specific thing. Without that, there would not be the community, and these people would not be counted as a group. But there are several people I haven't personally met, like you before, and I've been in several cows, so have you. But I do think that we could go and sit in a bar and feel like we belong to the same community because we can start talking about fake magic.
Yes.
You could probably have a wonderful discussion about the tavern or something that, like a similar experience that you both have had in the same place, in the same LARP, even though it might have been years in between.
Yeah, and there's also a degree to which it's almost philosophical. There's almost an approach that Cow's a brilliant example for this, because Cow has a style to its play that encourages cooperation and helping one another out. It encourages collaborative play. Part of the reason that the UK has so much difficulty building LARP communities is so many of our games are confrontational and player versus player. And the only interaction that you might have with a fellow player is as they've just ruined your plans. Or indeed, as they've shoved a knife between your ribs and killed your character. And that might be the first time you've ever met that person. So that's not conducive to good community building. Whereas Cow, if I'm going to stick a knife in your ribs, I'm going to talk to you about it first and say, would you like me to come and knife you? Is that something that we could do? Should we do that? And we'll negotiate that. And that does build community. And those shared experiences, as Linn said, experiences that don't even necessarily happen at the same time in the same place, that are linked by that magnificent castle, they are good for creating community.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, while writing my bachelor thesis of anthropology about game communities online, I went through so many theoretical books, and I found really nice theorem of symbolic community, which is something that some shared experience connects people. It could be like anything, metalheads, vegans, or like gay people, or like anything. But you have something to talk with each other, and something really personal to talk with each other.
That was exactly what I was about to say, that do we think that community is built around the shared experience of something, even though it doesn't need to be tangible in the same place?
I don't think I agree with positions that competitive play is somehow bad for communities. In Russia, in Krasnoyarsk town, there is a community that have values of very hard competitive play. They are like a proverb: if you are thinking too long, you may be came from game not kidding anyone. But they are really, they have one community in town and they know each other and they are not split it up.
what would interest me to know is that community, do the constituent people within it meet one another before the game? Or is it a community that you become part of after you've been involved in the game?
I don't know, actually.
Okay, because the reason I ask that...
I know, of course, because I'm from Siberia. He is talking about Siberia. Yes, they of course meeting each other. They have some community not only in the games but between the games. And my theory is why and they have the strongest community in Siberia. And Siberia is rather large, and many towns have their own communities. And in Krasnoyarsk, it's the most powerful because they have some common organizers which have some supplies, some to helping to organize.
I think they have charismatic leaders. Yela.
Yes, charismatic leaders who is organizer, not like she's not like an author, but helping to organize different authors, and it's and she's doing it for like 20 years, really. So it's a really big work for a long amount of time.
Yeah, so they do have common ground also between the games and through the games. I'm just recapping just in case to the tape.
Yeah, so where that differs in the UK is with our PvP games, with our player versus player games, there's no build-up to involvement in the game. So there are no workshops, there are no opportunities to get to know your competitors ahead of the game. You turn up at the game, it starts, you play, I murder Massi, we go home. Nice. And that's kind of the way that it works. We've never done any kind of community care around those games. We spend hours on weapons safety and no time at all on mental safety or emotional safety. And that's one of the things that the communities I'm involved in are trying to change.
There, I think, an interesting question is that our sort of thriving LARP communities, the ones that have community managers. Because, for example, for College of Wizardry, there is several people doing community management, not necessarily dedicated people by the organization themselves. The College of Wizardry now has one. But there is people who do this also as their jobs, who are then on their free time managing these communities. Also, the same happens in Finland a lot in Facebook and geek, like online communities, and also in the role-playing and LARP Facebook communities, that we have admins that also act as a sort of community managers. So a little bit tone policing, not for reals, but like, yeah, was it nice to call Ville a Nazi? No, stop that. And kind of like this kind of a community management.
Well, I think that's probably something that is relatively recent, because online communities didn't exist when we first started LARPing. So there was nobody who was doing this professionally, because it wasn't a role that existed. And communities generally, I kind of feel, would have been policed by their participants, policed by consensus, which is fine when you're all meeting up once a week to beat the snot out of one another in the woods. But the minute that you have gone from 50 people doing that on and off to 5,000 who are communicating over a medium with no body language and with no tone, you cause yourself a completely different challenge. And I suspect that, again, a lot of the fragmentation we see in our scene in the UK is because we took a while to realise that community management was an important thing to do.
Right. Okay. We've done that already. Kind of.
We're so good.
Covered all my questions here. You did mention before belonging to a community that's basically based on play style, which is freeform or Nordic LARP and such. Are they in some way different than these local or game-related communities? What's the difference?
I think this was for me. I do think that those are also larger communities that then have their own local, smaller communities, like a freeform community in the Nordics in general is a large community, but then they have the Danish, Swedes do call their thing a Jeep form to be different. Then there is this very small but fantastic Finnish freeform community, which we could say that the Finnish freeform community is Finnish owned, but we also operate under the consensus of the Danish Nordic freeform community, and sort of these all interlace a lot, but I think that there is a lot of local stuff and then a sort of wider community. But in the wider community, we also share the same experience of freeform, and this is what we do, and this is what we like.
If and rather when you belong to multiple LARP communities, do you ever feel like there's conflicts between the communities that you yourself belong in?
That's a big problem for me. LARPers in St. Petersburg accuse me that I'm like spying for Moscow in St. Petersburg.
It even follows you here.
Evgeny is also spying for Moscow through St. Petersburg. LARPer will never leave town, never leave city for any reason.
And you're doing it yourself. I haven't been having like personal problems, but I do think that at least earlier, when we didn't so much communicate online with Finns, with each other, we were a little bit like, well, you know, those people from Oulu, they're doing their weird shit LARPs, and oh my God, have you LARPed with them? Oh my God, they're so hardcore. What are they doing in the -degrees? Like, what? But I don't think that was actually like creating a problem. It's more like the common, normal, national problem that people from the capital region are saying, like people from the north and the northern people might be like, yeah, you know, those people who live in Helsinki, they are posh, stupid.
Yeah, there actually were quite many of this kind of prejudices, maybe. And when you have a local culture where there is a special way of doing things, like every time we do this, we have these rules, we have this kind of games, and you go somewhere where it's different. That's a shock. Like there was quite much discussion some years ago about using alcohol during the game events, inside the game or outside the game. And since we are used to be city-funded youth organization with zero tolerance of alcohol, for some it was a shock to go to game where people were so drunk that some of them, they couldn't even play properly. So then it started to be like a stereotype of game in southern Finland. Yes, southern Finland style game. People are so drunk, don't go there.
Totally wasted, like all the time.
Yeah, I've had this experience as well when I dared to go to my first Finnish-speaking LARP, and LARPed in English, this phenomenon where after the game, instead of going sauna and pizza as we do, people were drinking. And also because, insert joke about Fenno Swedes and money, we are city funded or state funded, so we also have the like, there's a zero tolerance for alcohol in that sense. So yeah, though I sort of recognize those shocks. I was going to say something, but I forgot it, so I'll get back to it.
I just shortly add that a lot of southern Finland LARPs are also city funded, or at least in the locations that are owned by the city, and there's zero tolerance for alcohol, so we're not all drunks.
Can I start out by saying how terribly jealous I am of all of you people with your lovely cities that are prepared to fund this amazing hobby of ours. No, that
Same for me.
yeah, that wouldn't happen in the UK. But to answer the question, there are plenty of people in the UK LARP scene as a whole who believe that me and many of my friends are trying to ruin their fun. In any scene comprising many communities, when you try to offer new ideas, sometimes those communities react by closing up and feeling attacked, feeling like they're being told they're not doing it right, which I'm afraid in some cases they are being told that. There are certain communities within the UK who still would like everything to be as it was in 1985, and the world has moved on and certain things are no longer acceptable. But the tribalism that comes with those communities gets in the way of good communication. And we're yet to find a really reliable way of being able to approach people and say, look, how about these ideas, without sometimes getting the reaction, you're ruining all my fun. Stop it, go away, we don't want you and your new ideas.
We do, I think, face that a lot in Finland as well, especially when ideas are proposed in online communities, like, okay, we should probably, not make sexist jokes or whatever the proposal is. And then there is always a backlash. But I think there we come to the point of community management, that how the backlash is then handled, how it's admin by the admins of the group, and how sort of the community of, well, in my mind, in this sexist jokes example, the sort of feminist, right-minded, good people come together and be like, okay, now seriously, I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, but it's idiotic, and don't say it aloud. Like, okay, we don't write exactly like this to this person, but we do discuss it over so that this person might also actually understand. But that is dedicated work that some people, I'm not actually actively doing this, so thank you for everyone who is. That is work that sort of the community needs to do. But if the community doesn't have the structure for doing that, then it's impossible.
So, picking up on that point and developing it a little further with reference to specific UK games and the communities around them, we have games that are 1,500 people. And when that sort of problem starts in that community, and that's 1,500 active participants at an individual game, the community or the scene around it is double, triple that. When that sort of dumpster fire kicks off on one of the dozen different forums or Facebook groups that are out there for the game, it becomes incredibly hard to manage the community. And that's within a game that's doing some really progressive and cool stuff around participant equality and safety. And specifically says in the rules of the game that there is no sexism within the game and it will not be tolerated, and take active interest and action on that when it happens within their game, which again, to just repeat, is 1,500 people in a massive field. And so full marks to them for doing that, but community management is tough. Really tough in that kind of community.
I think in Russia there's a big problem with all the regulation and the rules, because we see LARPs as a way to escape from these rules and regulations. And if you are talking about, okay, let's do this reasonable thing, let's always wear helmets when we are fighting hard plastic. Everybody say, okay, you have violated my freedom. It's a proposed land of talking. I could do everything what I want. So
I have the right to be concussed if I wish to be.
yes.
Oh yeah, after this kind of conversation, I must say that, yeah, I'm a true believer in this organized organizations, communities, where is some people who are really like dedicated to looking through the LARP budgets and plans, and they can say that, okay, your idea of the game is extremely dangerous, please change these things, otherwise you don't get any funding from us, or otherwise you cannot have your game under our label, under our like standards.
I feel you. this is the Nordic Finnish LARPers club right here, because I feel this too. I'd like to say that like if the original question I think was like, are there like differences in opinions between like LARP communities that you are in? I'd like to say yes, because I'd like to have more like dialogue between the different communities, or mainly the Finno-Swedish community and other communities, but because of the language barrier, the Finno-Swedish community is very contained, sort of. It doesn't really have a whole lot, unfortunately, have a lot of like connection to other communities. For some reason, we don't really connect that well to the Swedes either, even though our language is the same. It might have something to do with the eternal sort of little brother phenomenon, always feeling that Sweden is always going to do this a little better. But yeah, yes, don't get me, yeah. Yes, but so there's, I wish that there would be like, and yeah, because I'm one of the few people that I know who are okay with speaking English to other people from my country, even though, because most people, yeah, that thing. But I just remember this one time when I was showing some pictures from some game that we had done a couple of years back to a Finnish speaking friend from Finland, and she went, "Ah, this is like the kind of games that, like old-fashioned fantasy that we did 15 years ago," which was meant in all, like in a very, not meant nedvärderande, yes, at all, but it sort of shows that the community that I'm from is sort of new in the sense that we're still stuck in that sort of old school fantasy. We keep rebuilding the wheel all the time, so we would really gain a lot from communicating more. So yeah, do contact us. We don't bite.
Oh, but I think your point is really good, but there is difference between problems and dialogue.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yep, true, yes.
Yeah.
But I'd also, like, there needs to be dialogue to start with for there to be problems. I wouldn't mind problems either, but the dialogue would have to be there first.
Trust me, there are plenty of problems you don't want.
Anyway, about solving the problem, I think like the best sides of like a well-organized community, if there is nice people, that if you face some problem, you can always ask and get some help. Like, okay, if this idea doesn't work or is not accepted, maybe you get some more ideas how I should make it better, or how I could take into account different kinds of people if I didn't know it myself before. So it's kind of like structure, easy to prevent the problems.
Yeah, community is when it's a good community, it's also sort of this safety net of peer review. It can be a very toxic place where this happens, but it happens like management by perkele kind of way, where you're just thrown into the wolves because you said something stupid or thought that some idea would work, even though it's accidentally dangerous. Or you didn't manage to have toilets for your LARPs, like this has happened. But when the community is really good, when it is in its best, it is a safety net for the organizers and for the LARPers to find like solutions for their problems and be lifted up. And I think this can be toned with sort of community management. Is it an actual organized organization or just like a sort of more untangible solution of a community?
I don't think that there's any coincidence that communication and community both come from the same root as words. Certainly from the UK's point of view, I've seen a great deal of value in the outreach we've been doing with the international community over the past 3 or 4 years. Our scene is thriving, our games are getting better, and a number of the improvements and developments that have come to the UK scene have come directly from people who have been out and experienced what you guys are doing in Nordic scenes and in the Spanish scene, in the Italian Southern Way, and going out and experiencing other people's games in other communities and then bringing that best practice back into our own scene. And it's wonderful.
All right. I'll go back to something I think Massi and John mentioned during this conversation, that you make a suggestion and there's backlash, like you're ruining my fun. Is this backlash worse if the suggestion is made online versus in person?
Yes.
Online equals yes.
And how the management of the backlash, how is it different when it has to be done in person or online? And do you have some insight into that difference?
Well, it's much more easier to be really rude to some people who you don't know in internet. But being really rude to your friends, that's something that you shouldn't do if you want to have friends later on.
And also body language and tone doesn't come across online as much.
But if it's your friend who is acting really badly, misbehaving, it could be really difficult actually to like change the situation. Because
Yeah, it can be if you're not angry old feminist like me.
There's also, I know I feel this sometimes when I'm participating in discussion online, because of all the reasons that we've talked about, the lack of body language and the lack of tone. It can really get under your skin, and you can take time to formulate the most cutting, awful comeback to the person that's upset you. And you can go away and you can spend like 20 minutes, half an hour sat there working out exactly how you're going to push all of those buttons because they didn't like my idea for a LARP on an island, and God damn it, I'm going to get back at them. And that's not helpful. You can't do that in a conversation because you can't say, sorry, I don't agree with you. I'm going to go over there and think about what I'm going to say to get back at you. The time does not help.
We did have this conversation like half a year ago in Finland. The tone in our online community had been going very toxic, and in this convention for LARP organizers, XCon, we discussed this in an open sort of discussion group. And from there came this communication challenge, which was published then I think in the start of the year, I can't remember exactly, in a role-playing blog magazine thing online. And then it went into the community with the hashtag like communication challenge. It had some pointers of, always think that the person is writing with good intentions and so on, and try to understand, and always answer with sort of take a deep breath before you answer, and so on. And even that got backlash. Mm-hmm. Like it worked a little. I think the tone of the community turned a little bit better, and people were actually using the hashtag from time to time, being like, well, this conversation is not working, hashtag communication challenge. Or I don't remember what the English hashtag was, but anyways. But the backlash for that was that you are harming my freedom of speech by asking me to be nice in the internet. It's like, oh, come on.
One of the advantages we do have in the UK is that we have no enshrined right to freedom of speech. So nobody can come back with the, oh, you're harming my freedom of speech. Sorry, you don't have a right to that. Terribly sorry. So shut up, you're wrong.
Excellent, yeah.
All right. So I figure as communities grow larger, they start to form these smaller communities within it. And they do often also form cliques. And I would like to hear some opinions on cliques within communities. Are they a harmful thing or are they a good thing? Do you have some insight to this?
Yes, because over the years I've been accused of being part of many different cliques within UK Larp communities. They are not in and of themselves harmful. Often they don't actually exist. Often the cliques that people see are a figment of their own concerns about the community and the way that it interacts. Often I have been accused of being part of something that is no more than just a group of friends, and a group of friends that I've met indeed through those very games that the people are participating in, and that they are well on their way to being folded into that clique. The perception of them is inherently harmful. Because it is only a perception that feeds insecurities and concerns within the person who's observing it from the outside. I think it's very rare that anybody looks around at their friends and thinks, oh yeah, we're a clique, and no, you can't come in. Mostly, if the person who is complaining about it had enough self-confidence or was reached out to be pulled into that group of friends, then the problem would go away.
Yeah, the clique is quite a negative term. On the other way, yeah, it could be a group of friends, and if you want to belong, to get the feeling that you belong in the community, you have to have friends there, the special friends who are like you're happy to meet with, and that kind of like smaller groups in a group, it can help you to find your place inside the community, local or online or whatever. But on the other hand, when it comes problems between individuals, like it always comes, unfortunately, when you are belonging the same local community 20 years, there is always something, like it happens. And it could start like gossiping, or like then it could turn really negatively if people stay in these cliques and they are building a fight between the cliques. It could happen, but well.
Yeah, I also agree that the cliques by themselves as small communities inside communities are not in any way harmful, but the perception of them, or if people just keep in them. If I'm just with this group of people that is part of my community, but we sort of don't communicate with anyone else, that becomes harmful, not by itself, but what kind of a perception it creates. So I totally agree with.
Anyone else have a...
I think that the clique, it's not something that happens to us. It happens to them. So we are not part of any clique. They are evil clique. And if this mistrust happens in community, that's most probably reason that we are not working together, we are not playing together, we are not communicating enough, and that we should fix it or we should divorce.
This question kind of ties a little bit to the next one, which is about how welcoming are LARP communities to newcomers, and if what I'm thinking is if there's a perception that there's these cliques that you really can't get into, then it'll be harder for a newcomer to come in. How does this manifest in your communities? And what could we make it better somehow? Yes.
Yeah, as a true believer, again, I must say that having the formed organization, it really forces you to make it open. We had, at some point, we actually realized that, okay, we are getting too old to get any money from the city. We should get some new people, some youngsters to play with us. But, yeah, if the community is small, but it has the need for continuity, you have to be open for newcomers because, well, someday you will be too few to really live longer. So to keep your community alive, it really had to be kind of open.
In Denmark, especially in the countryside Denmark, I feel that the LARP communities are really, really difficult to get in. And I don't now mean the children's LARP scene where you sort of pay money and then you can smack adults with soft swords. I don't count that per se as a LARP or part of the Danish LARP scene, even though it's huge thing in Denmark. Actually, more children LARP than play football. That's great. But as an adult, it is anyways difficult to make new friends. I mean, it is difficult for adults to create these connections, and then you try to enter a community which is they're very clicked. They're very okay, well, we are from this city A and you are from this city B, and we from city A do not vampire LARP with city B because you suck. There is no reason, but somebody said 20 years ago in a party something stupid, and we keep on this, you are dicks, all of you. It was very absurd to come from outside and being what's going on here? Why are you so clicked? It was totally impossible to get in. I tried for 5 years and finally I got into the LARP scene.
Linn was...
Yeah. I, again, agree with Kaisa that especially when it comes to small LARP scenes, having some kind of community management handling of this is so great. For example, at the Solmukohta Knutpunkt conference, there's, for example, the always speak English even when you're talking to people from your same country, always keep a chair, one chair free if you're sitting in a group. So to sort of keep it very easy for new people to just sit down and be like, hi, I'm this person, what are you talking about? I suppose when LARP communities arise within, for example, groups of friends, that's more of a tricky click to sort of get into, but then yeah.
May I add before? My first experience in LARP was that I went to the game, I knew no one. And the first people who came to me was so happy, oh, it's so wonderful to have someone new, who are you? And she was really positive and friendly, and it was wonderful. I want to keep that attitude with myself. And it's quite easy because when we have a game, you usually know everyone there. But if there is someone who is new, you want to keep that one in your community. So that's why, that's really good reason to make effort. And of course, being nice to people, it's always worth it.
In St. Petersburg, we had very hard discussions about how if we are friendly to newcomers. Half of community thinks we are unfriendly and that should be fixed, and other half of community thinks we are unfriendly and it should be kept as is. Because we don't need newcomers to our community to survive. We have community big enough, and newcomers, it's a problem. They do not know how to LARP. We don't want to spend time to educate them, blah, blah, blah. And actually, I think for last 5 or 10 years, maybe the way to go into St. Petersburg community is to create your own small community and then merge with a big community as a not newcomers. Okay, we are LARPing for like 2 years. We just do not know about you. Let's merge.
Again, I think there's a slight difference in the UK scene. We're very lucky in that we have a very large scene with a lot of games going on. Every game is interested in recruiting new people. Every game is interested in ensuring that every game they run sells out. And so we've taken a lot of steps in the last decade or so to make LARPs that much more beginner friendly, to open up those communities in easy ways. So the big fantasy LARP I was talking about earlier on holds, I think it's 3 new player workshops at the start of each of their events, which have had, I think on one occasion they had 150 new people turn up to one of the workshops, which must have been quite a challenge. They'd done a deal, and some YouTubers had come to the previous event and had then done a review, and they had a lot of subscribers, and lots of their subscribers turned up wanting to play this new game. I think there's quite a lot of good new practice going on in the UK scene for including newcomers in to LARPs and finding ways to make them feel welcomed into a community, and that is practice that I am sure we are happy to share.
Massi.
Here I think that we could, look into you, but also to the Polish-Danish College of Wizardry LARP. We were just with Linn and Laura in the College of Wizardry 17, and more than half of the players were newcomers. And the LARP was amazing. I mean, it is not a bad LARP if most of the LARPers are newcomers. Newcomers are awesome. But it's very difficult to get them when they look at our online communities and are like, oh my God, no, what's going on? Like, I would like to try LARPing, but these people are just fighting over, like, how can you sleep in a sleeping bag? Or does somebody have authentic underwear? Or like, what are these people? So I understand that it's also very difficult to, nowadays, with the online communities around, to actually enter scenes, because now you can research them. When I started LARPing, there was no online community. I got my LARP character in mail. That was great. So Game Masters knew where everybody lives.
So to kind of follow that up, I was at Cow 16 with Kaisa the weekend before Cow 17, and that too was about 60% newcomers. And a large portion of that comes from the social media influencers out there. The fact that George Takei reshared the College of Wizardry promotional video. And I know that he did that because I'm quite obviously in one of the early shots. And all of a sudden, my Facebook PMs lit up with people who are not LARPers, who don't really pay attention to most of the stuff I post on Facebook because it's all LARP, saying, is this you? Because George Takei had shared the video and it had gone out and been reshared and reshared and reshared. And we have a really great opportunity currently to bring new people into this hobby. We can grow our hobby like we have never been able to do it before. But we, as people who have an interest in seeing that happen, we have a responsibility to ensure that when they come to the College of Wizardry Facebook groups, they're met with smiles and welcoming open arms rather than make sure you're wearing the right kind of underwear.
Leo and then Kaisa, I think.
We have a quite popular theory in Russia that the big competitive team-based games attract newcomers better than other kind of games, because I need knight for my team, and I have an incentive to talk with newcomer, to be friendly to him, to teach him, to educate him. So I don't have such intensity if I have individual character in some LARP.
We have used this kind of nice method of taking the newcomers with zero experience, that it's not a rule, it's not a recommendation even, it's just like a principle. That you rather take the newcomer into your game and then leave your friends outside. Not all of them, but anyway, to somehow guarantee that the people can start the hobby easily. And then you can provide a tutor to him or her to at least have some connection, someone to ask questions, someone who is welcoming you when you go to the place where the game is. And it has been working really well. But yeah, what was said before, it's more difficult to get the new people to come into your game. And we have had a LARP camps, we have had workshops in the schools, we have been in hobby fairs, and they haven't been really fruitful. It has been really difficult to find people who want to play.
Yes. I think John had
Yes, so going back to somewhere that we can learn from, as Massi suggested, Cal, one of the things that they do that really seems to make a difference to the newcomers is the whole idea of building relations. There are many opportunities for new players to come in and build relations with older or more experienced LARPers. And in my experience, the more experienced LARPers are doubly pleased when they're approached by a newcomer, and doubly willing to try and form a character relation, which can then turn into helping that person to integrate into the community.
This is, of course, very sort of community culture related, because, for example, in many Finnish LARP communities, the characters and the contacts are written by the game master, and Finns do, in our own Facebook groups where we talk about when we go to outside of Finland to LARP, for example, to College of Wizardry, we talk about oh my God, it's so difficult to contact these people. It's not actually physically difficult, but I just feel I can't, and my English is not so good, and I'm a Finn, I want to be alone in the sauna. Kind of the stereotype is real. It's even difficult for me to actually take the contact, and I'm everywhere all the time, and still so even though that's a good community building mechanism, I think it doesn't work for everything. So I wouldn't say that it is a sort of token tool of here you go. There, I would say that Kaisa's suggestion or your principle, where you have sort of this token places for token newcomers, that is definitely something that everyone should do. I do that also in the LARP side design, because, certain amount of spots dedicated to not necessarily dedicated characters, but dedicated spots for newcomers. Make sure that you sort of at least have the, I don't know, if you have 70-person LARP, 10 newcomers, that's quite good.
One of the very interesting things that Terra Spezzate, the Italian LARP company, did with Raven Crew was they actually had a set number of tickets set aside for people whose first LARP it was, and they were cheaper. They gave them a financial discount for first-time LARPers, which I thought was very interesting.
Once in Russia was game about colonial India, and there was a rule: if you are playing first or second year, you could be a character from Great Britain, and if you are not, you should be Indian. And it would greatly promote young players to like visible roles in the game, and also solve the problem with not enough players wants to be from India, checkers from India.
Yeah, I totally agree that for newcomers, you should also make sure that you do not, in your community, to give spots or give LARP characters that are just statists in the background, you know, the orc number 3 on the left kind of characters, because they won't come back if you do that. But give them the princesses and don't belittle their experiences, because you had the chance in whatever 90s to be the elf queen with standing on the stone, wind flying your hair and your cape. You need to be able to give that experience to the newcomers as well. They do not need to like the prison camp LARP, which is hugely emotional immediately. Like, nobody actually comes into this hobby right away and is like, oh, I just want to eat beans in a can for 4 days in the mud. Like, that's a it can be a great experience, but let them also be the queens and kings and princes and experience all the things that we did in the start, and do not belittle it.
I think, I totally agree with Massi that in game design you can especially just design it that every newcomer has some close contact, which is if she's a queen, like the contact it's actually the advisor or something like that. So then you create a safe environment and support the game.
All right, I will go to my next question. What is the best thing in the LARP communities you belong in? Just pick the best qualities of these that you wish all your LARP communities had.
Oh my God, that's so difficult.
Yeah, that's so, okay.
I actually, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I actually find it quite easy. Because I immediately think of the international LARP community, and it's how welcoming everyone is, how interested they are to hear, how randomly you get a PM from someone saying, we've LARPed a few times together, I think you're quite smart, I'd like you to sit on a panel at a Finnish role-playing convention, and you go, yes, all right, why shouldn't I? The number of new friends, new experiences, places that I've ended up over the last 3-4 years since joining the international LARP community is incredible. And it's showing no signs of slowing down or stopping. I keep meeting new, incredible people, and that's just wonderful.
I want to say also the amount of safety, player safety, like mental safety in especially, again, the Nordic LARP community, because it's something that is on a completely different level from the other, or my older communities. So that's something that I hugely appreciate, and something that I'd love to bring back to my old community also, if possible.
Yeah, this question is extremely easy for me. I would say friendship. And in the local communities, it's possible that you find like true friends. You find the people to hang around outside the games in your free time, to celebrate the New Year's Eve with, to play board games with, do everything, and of course to find your special someone maybe.
I did.
Me too.
We're all here for the dates.
I totally agree with what all of you said, so I'm not going to repeat that. One thing that for now in this community that I would maybe call Finnish LARP designers and LARP producers that are already a little bit older. We I don't know, old farts. We're not really old farts. I'm not old. But I don't think so. I'm emotionally at least 80. But like this group of people, this community have been organizing LARPs for 2 decades. Organizer safety is a thing that has now been started to be talked about and understood that we need to also keep ourselves safe. We keep our players safe, and that's great, but we don't have safety net for ourselves, and then we all burn out, and horrible stuff will happen, and we'll never recover. So that would be the thing that I would now say that is the best, hippest thing we have in the organizer community in Finland.
Leo?
I think in both in St. Petersburg community and in ComCon community in Moscow, most of participants not only play LARPs but try to organize them. So we don't have this kind of hierarchy when someone is big organizer and someone is just a player. It's like we're switching roles and seeing the situation from both kind of viewpoints.
Okay. On the flip side, what's the worst thing in the communities that you belong in and you love? What's the worst thing in them?
Turn off the camera.
Entrenched toxicity. The fact that there are still people who don't get that things change, and that we as communities have to adapt to those changes. We have to find ways to continue to do the things we love without being horrible about them.
Yeah, all that drama. Social conflicts, where conflicts between people, which could affect to the whole community sometimes. Well, if people don't get along, that's problematic.
I am also in for toxicity. You know, we have a lot of attempts in Russia to have like a social media about good things in our LARP community, but only social media it survives this channel about bad things and conflicts and discussions on the internet. And when somebody is doing some bad thing, I don't know what you're talking about. No. Absolutely not.
I totally agree with toxicity, but I'd also say the thing that annoys me most in the Danish and the Finnish LARP communities, rumor mills. Oh my god, people, like none of your business. LARPers are such a good group of drama people that they will create a rumor about everything. Like they were in the toilet queue together.
And
No, I think you said it.
Did you have?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm choosing to keep my mouth shut, I think.
How do we make it better? How do we make our LARP communities better? What can we as players and designers do to make things a little bit better, especially in the subjects that you just mentioned as the worst things?
Communicate.
Anyone?
The linguist.
Totally, like communicate, but also keep eye on the community management and actually like talk about also that. Talk about the meta stuff, talk about the structure, how we are designing the social interaction. Was it online or then like together in a bar? I would like to just take an example from Helsinki LARP community meets often, or part of it meets often on Tuesdays in this beer restaurant called Kaisa, and there was discussion about there were some people who were making it a little bit toxic or just had their opinions loudly spoken over other people's opinions. They were totally entitled to their opinions, but if they speak 15 minutes a row and nobody else gets to say anything, that's not nice. So we actually put the cat on the table and talked about it. We talked that how we can do, because these people are not doing it because they're evil. They just don't notice, but it's making everything else not so nice. So we talked about how we can sort of change it, how we can interact with them so that they notice that this is happening. They were part of the discussion, some of them, and so on. And this has changed. maybe some of these people stopped coming because they were annoyed that they weren't just let to keep monologuing, like I'm monologuing now. But the situation really changed. And I think there we did discuss the meta stuff. We did discuss the structure of the social interaction. And we fixed it. Communicating.
I think for me, stop worrying so much about community. That sounds like a crazy thing to be saying on a communities panel, but communities are not an entity so much in their own. They're made up of people. Deal with the people. So try and pay it forward. If somebody has done something good for you, try and do something good for someone else in your scene. Or if you've been made to feel welcome as a newcomer at a game, then when you see a newcomer arriving in that game, try and go out of your way to make them feel welcome. If you focus on the one-to-one interactions, then your community as a whole will grow and get better and be a nicer place within which to reside.
I think it should be quite easy in theoretical level. It's just like, don't speak shit about people, you know. And if you have some like personal conflict with someone, maybe you should deal it with that person, not in a public event loudly telling everyone that you have some problem with someone. It's like not more communication, but thinking about what is the right place and the right forum for that problem of yours.
Leo or Linn?
I don't know actually what we can do to improve our communities. I think that you should not try to feel responsible for community. You should try to contribute whenever you can. But if you think too much, okay, what we should do, blah 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 blah, we should do this for community, it could lead to, burnout.
I think if communities are about sort of bringing people together and having some kind of us feeling, then there's always going to be also the they, and so sort of thinking about how, while having that feeling of community in the same time not excluding potential other people, and thinking about how one is perceived.
All right, that was actually all of my questions. Do the panel have more to add on this subject, or do our audience have any questions or comments that they want to bring up at this point? Anyone? I will bring you this. Is this working? Yes, it is.
As a newcomer, I want to thank you. I have been on one LARP in my life, and it is so nice to hear that it is going all around the Europe and Northern Europe so well that everybody is taking care of us, and it is really nice to see that it goes even more well than I have been experiencing. My experience with Finnish community is the best thing is honesty. We have really painful and awesome conversations in our community, and it tells me that the community is whole and healthy, and it goes on and it is growing, and it is awesome to experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I think
Well, I actually got very many ideas and thoughts, but I'm gonna go first to the main. Apparently, I'm living in England without knowing it. It's a lot smaller, but we've got exactly the same shit.
I'm sorry.
Never mind that our entire community at its best days is the number of your newcomers to one LARP.
I'll just add to the camera that her cap says Estonia, so she might be from Estonia.
I have one question to all our panelists. Maybe it already was because I was not from the beginning. My question is, does your community somehow interested in integration with other community? And if yes, what the way of integration is interest for your community?
Also, please come to St. Petersburg to play Larp. Very fun.
Do you mean interaction or integration?
Integration, yeah, integration.
Okay.
Integration with other communities.
Yep. Like interaction. Integration.
Like merging.
Merging with other community. Okay. Yeah. Now I understand the question. I think a lot of communities I'm part of would not like to disappear and merge with other communities. Instead, I think they would like to, or it would be great, I think personally for all of us, that it would be great to have a lot of interaction between communities so that there would be dialogue and new ideas exchanged and so on. But I do not see a situation where we would be like, yay, let's merge with the Estonians. That's great. Though we would technically like to, they're Nordics as well, so.
Well, at least the local communities you can actually integrate. We had organization in Oulu and one in Rovaniemi. And I don't know, should I really talk about two communities or one community? Because I don't see any difference, just the location, but we are taking part to the same games, we are actually like sharing the same discussion forums, and it's like no difference.
Sorry to repeat myself, but yeah, I have a very similar experience, and once again I forgot what I was going to say. I'm blaming the heat. Someone else take the.
So something I find useful about communities is that there's not a finite number. You don't have to get rid of one in order to have a new one. So where you talk about integration, I suggest that what we're actually talking about is creating new communities. And certainly I think that's a fine idea, because more communities mean more communication, more ways of exchanging ideas and coming up with plans where we can cooperate to make the whole hobby better.
So technically you could have the Oulu community and the Rovaniemi community and then the great Oulu Rovaniemi community.
Oh yes, and the Oulu Rovaniemi community in Helsinki and the Kuopio community, or the people from Eastern Finland who come to our games and people from Turku who come to our games, they could be inside the same community of Northern Finland if they want to be active there. So it's not actually dedicated in the location. You can integrate with us if you are active, but like us integrating into some other community, I don't get the idea.
I think the Finno-Swedish LARP community would love to merge with other Finnish LARP communities, but I think there are practical obstacles for it. And also I think there's the somewhat the potential fear of losing one's own identity also if one merges with a larger community in that sense, but I don't think it's something that's going to practically happen.
But for that we can use that interaction and cooperation, and I have now this project of making a game exchange, like bringing games from some other places to North, because now, well, we would just love to have more games there, but in our own resources we cannot make any more. So like things like that, and we also have good games to bring to the other communities, so why not?
And that's where events we've touched on, like Knutepunkt, like this. I know we've got a couple of Estonian LARPs running tomorrow. And The Smoke in London in January, quick plug. We invite game rights from all over the world to come run short LARPs, and we have a community of people who will come and will play new, different LARPs. And that helps facilitate that kind of cultural and idea exchange.
My name is Evgenia, I'm from Russia, and my question is about identities of the communities. Do you have some special identities for the communities, and do you have toxic identities that people would be ashamed of in their everyday life, in their job, and so on?
Well, I think most of communities create some kind of identity to you. When you belong to a community, you get some kind of a tag of identity. But some of them can be toxic, and some of them you not necessarily want to. Like example from Finland, you might belong into a community even if you didn't think about it, of LARPers who have been LARPing since the 90s and organize LARPs and cons and whatnots and so on. And you might get this identity of an elitist LARPer. And that is a very, very toxic tag to have on your neck, because you might not be an elitist at all. And what does it even mean to be an elitist LARPer? But people might think that as you have this, not necessarily an identity that you identify yourself, but other people identify to you, that, you know, you were judged their games, nothing is good enough for you, you're just, you know, need this and this kind of immersion to be a LARPer, and you're just thinking that everybody born in the 2000s are idiots, and, you know, like, that kind of identity can be very toxic to get for yourself from outside.
And yes, just to agree and to follow up on that, I recently spent a little bit of time on Facebook asking friends, and especially new friends, what their initial impression of me had been, which was quite an eye-opener. And the word that kept coming up was intimidating. Lots of people, when they first met me, apparently found me intimidating. And that's not an identity that I think I've cultivated. It's not something I was doing intentionally. But by examining that and trying to figure out what it was I was doing, I've changed some behaviours to hopefully try and mitigate that. Turns out the main part of what I was doing was being vocal. I was standing up and being in front of people and having opinions and offering those opinions and appearing to know what I was talking about. I don't. I'm making it up. But identities are conveyed to you and they are placed upon you. And it's a question of trying to have enough, I don't know, self-awareness to realise when those identities become toxic. Because I want to meet you all and I want to get to know you all, and I don't want you to not come and talk to me because people think I'm intimidating. I'm not.
And some point, does identity of LARPer is something that you do not want that people at your job know about? In Russia, that's a thing that happens with LARPers, you know, and I think Evgenia is somehow asking about it also.
Yeah. On the other hand, in the LARP community, you don't always want your fellow LARPers to know what you are doing in your working time, and it's not discussed quite often. It has been many years since I have known someone, and then finally found out that, oh, you're really like a mother of 3 children? Oh, really? Or something which is not secret, but we talk about different things when we meet. Or your work. Why does anyone to talk about your work when you're LARP weekend?
I think the identity of a LARPer, is it okay or not to have outside of the LARP community as known, depends a lot about how mainstream LARP is and what kind of a thing people around you in the society think that LARP is, how they see it. Because if they see it as a Satan worship in a cave where you are sacrificing children, or just like in Denmark, a children's hobby. It was for a very long time so that some Danish LARPers didn't want to tell that they're LARPers because people would think that, oh, so you go to the forest with kids and you hit each other with swords? That's your hobby? So when people think something like that, then you might not want to let your identity to be known as a LARPer. But like now in Finland, LARP is quite mainstream already. Everybody knows what LARP is, and it's not seen very embarrassing thing to do anymore. It definitely was. Like, it was very embarrassing at some point, or people were thinking that it's embarrassing. I wasn't embarrassed. But now when it's mainstream, we are in the news all the time. There is stories written about us. There is communities. There is this one of the Finland's biggest festivals called Ropecon, and so on. So, like, now it's not a thing that we would hide. But of course, some people need to hide it for reasons unknown to me, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's like nerd culture has become so much more mainstream that at least for me it has never been a problem to be able to. I'm a proud LARPer, and that has never been a problem. But for example, my mother used to work as a teacher, and one of her colleagues once took her aside and wanted to tell her that she's heard that her daughter does role play. Do you know about this? Should you? I don't know if you like. So there, I suppose there are some conservative people that still have some prejudices, but that's sort of more of a exception these days than the rule.
I myself feel that in my LARP community, I can be myself, and outside the community, in the real world, I always have to play some role. So it's like it's on the other way around.
And once again, I find myself being incredibly jealous of the Scandinavian LARP communities because in the UK, it is still carrying with it that kind of stigma that this is a hobby for nerds and not in a positive way.
Sorry to hear that.
I can tell you that in my work interview 5 years ago, I told my future boss that I was a role player. I was not actively LARPing at the time, but if I were, I would have told. And I still got the job. And my international LARP escapades are the frequent talk of the lunch table, because they're like, "Oh, you do this? How exciting and how exotic!" So they don't really get LARP, but they're very excited about it.
Yeah, I also got one advertising job by being a LARPer because they were like, "Oh, great! So you could do shit."
Yes, we can all make LARP a little bit more mainstream by talking openly about it.
And say for me, when I had a job interview, the manager asked me, "Do you have any experience of managing people?" You know, I said, "Okay, I made a volunteer event with 40 members of staff and 600 participants." And they said, "Okay, you probably could manage a team of 5 people."
Time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you around. Thanks to my panelists also.
Thank you, Kaisa. Thank you.